Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter comes to us from Lucasville, Ohio, from a subscriber. Jeffrey, okay, let me start off with where I live. I grew up in a little town of Lucasville, Ohio, way back in the hills. I was at least 8 years old and always enjoyed nature and running throughout the woods. Until one day, about dusk, I was sitting in my yard playing with my dolls and got a strange feeling that something was wrong. I didn't hear any birds, frogs, nothing. It was dead silent. I felt like I was being watched. I glanced around frantically, trying to spot what was making me feel this way. Then it happened. At the edge of the wood line on a hill, I see what looked like a dog with no eyes, no nose, just sharp teeth and black holes where its eyes should be. This thing growled viciously at me and I froze. I jumped up and ran screaming back to the house. Got my dad and we went back outside to look for this thing. And it was gone. I never saw that thing again, like in plain sight, but sometimes when I looked out my windows at the woods, I would see its glowing red eyes staring back at me and hear its horrible growl when the wind blows. So if you ever come to Lucasville, be careful and don't go outside at night. Part 2 of the Lucasville encounter. Jeff, so like I said, my family has lived in the Hollow for most of my life. There's supposed to be a curse on the land. People have been murdered and animals are buried and seen after. My brother's dog died and we could hear him whine and howl. Sometimes it was like he was at the foot of our beds and his whines would turn to growls. Late one night our mom was working at town, so it was just me and my brothers. The lights were out and we were almost asleep when we heard footsteps coming towards the door of the house and the growling began. My older brother grabs the gun and I start to cry. This creature hits the door hard. Boom! I scream, boom, again. My older brother takes me into a room and shuts and locks the door. My oldest brother kicks open the door and begins firing the gun up in the air. Those shots rang out through the night. We looked out the window to see what was happening and saw the creature run to the edge of the woods and glare back its eyes. Oh, they were terrible, glowing red eyes. And it let out this horrific howl and ran off into the night. We never saw that creature again either, but we know it's still out there watching us. Today's second encounter. Now, I still don't know if what I saw was real there, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not remembering correctly. But here's what I remember. I'd gotten into an argument with my mother over God knows what and left the house. I walked out of the garage and onto the driveway. The layout of the house was such that the garage kind of stuck past the house, and to the side of it was an empty lot. Behind that was my backyard. My bike was laying further out onto the driveway, and as I went to retrieve it, I heard this noise behind me. What that noise was, I really don't remember. I just know something caused me to turn around. What I saw looked like a wolf, but it stood at least 7 feet tall. See, I was 5'1" at the time, and this thing was at least 2 feet taller than me. It was covered in a dull, black, grayish fur everywhere except for its stomach, which was hairless and light pink colored. It had its hands on the wall as it was kind of leaning over the wall from the side looking at me. It moved its head closer, and I believe it spoke, but I can't be sure as it didn't say anything I could understand. As quickly as it came, it was gone. It turned, jumped over my fence, which had to be close to 5.5 feet tall, and was gone. My neighborhood was 2 circular cul-de-sacs, and I lived in the interior one. The other one surrounded mine, had woods surrounding that, except for the left side, which was a cornfield. Now I know this sounds like BS, and I literally can't prove that it happened to anyone or even to myself. I just wanted to know if anyone else had anything similar like this happen. I think about it to this day, trying to explain it to myself or even understand if it really happened or I somehow imagined it so vividly. Today's third encounter comes to us from the United Kingdom. I don't even know how to explain this, but I'm not the sort of person who believes in ghosts, devils, demons, and cryptids, but this has changed my mind drastically. I live in the United Kingdom and live on the countryside. I live in a moderately busy lane and have loads of fields behind my house. 5 minutes up the road, there's a hill. It's called Coal Peak. I changed the name for privacy. It's about 6 fields away from my house and a 5-minute walk from the road. Me and 2 of my mates go to the peak that overlooks out the town, and you can see the Severn Bridge and a place called the Stone House. They smoke weed, but I don't, so I can't blame it on the weed. We sat up on top for a good hour just chilling and decided to go home when it was about 2 a.m. They walked the roadway as it leads to town where they live, and I decided to walk through the field way as I didn't want to walk down the road on my own after my mates turned off. So to get to the fields, you have to walk through a little forest, around 1 to 2 minutes. It was pitch black, moon shined bright, stars in the sky. As I said before, I don't scare easy, so it wasn't bothered. I got about 2/3 through the forest when I started hearing sticks crackling to my left and something heavy walking. I just glance over and presume it's a fox or some sort of badger. I get towards the gate and open it, and it leads to the field that leads to my house. I close the gate and start to walk, and that's when I heard something I'll never forget. It sounded like the Minecraft creeper, but a lot more deeper and bigger. I turn around, and on the path I can see this thing, around 6 feet tall, skinny as heck, and had a head of a dog, but it had horns. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, so I just stood there watching it, hoping it would just vanish. Well, to my surprise, after 5 seconds, it started to very slowly walk closer and closer until it got to the gate. It was like it didn't know what to do except just stand there. Now I'm sweating and had red vision and thought I was going to have an anxiety attack. I slowly walked across the field trying to figure out what I just saw. I looked back, and halfway across the field it was gone. Sigh of relief. Can finally calm down and just take a nice walk home. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I was in the last field from my house in view.
I knew all I had to do was jump over my fence and I was in my garden. I got to the fence and hopped over. I felt safe and secure, and I was walking across my garden to get to the back door, and behind me my drive light came on. Now this light only comes on if it detects motion or it's real windy out and a branch blows in front of it. It wasn't windy, and nor did I walk past it. All of a sudden, I get this fear of getting snatched, so I quickly run to my back door and open it, and run to my attic converted room. My skylight window looks out over my drive where the light came on, and I stood on my bed and looked out the window. That's when I see this werewolf-looking thing with horns, standing there sniffing around the cars. It wasn't a dog, it wasn't small enough to be a badger or a fox, and wasn't a cow or anything like that. I got into bed and just watched movies till the sun came up and then finally fell asleep. Ever since then, I never look out my window at night and never walk through those fields. I honestly don't know what that thing was, but it scared me so bad that I won't even go into the garden past 11 p.m. What do you guys think it was? Today's fourth Dogman encounter comes to us from Daniel Boone National Forest, Kentucky, April 2015. My wife and I were traveling the Smoky Mountains from Ohio on our anniversary getaway. We usually avoid highways in our travels and instead prefer the scenic and slower-paced state routes of my childhood. This trip stood out as quite a disaster as we struggled with both the GPS and paper maps while navigating a route that I was at least somewhat familiar with. Navigational errors are not our norm, and we quickly found ourselves having an uncharacteristic argument that got fairly heated, but was nonsensical. It was like we both spoke different languages and we were looking at different maps. We eventually found ourselves in an increasingly less populated area and poor road conditions. For those not familiar with the area, being in central Kentucky, the forest is hilly and expansive, dotted with small towns and occasional private-owned farm amidst the federal land. We had eventually quieted down, anxiously following the GPS as it cut in and out. Our anxiety grew until the GPS suddenly chimed in and said, "Turn left now." I responded by reluctantly starting to turn when my wife suggested it must be a shortcut we were unaware of. Upon completing the turn, I slowed, seeing that the road took a sudden drop in quality. Potholes large enough to get a tire stuck in. Overgrown scrub growth on the edges of the ominous gnarled vines hanging down. The hair on my neck stood up and still does right now as I recall this. Bringing the car to a stop, I ask my wife, "Are you sure about this?" As I look towards her, "No, we need to turn around," she starts to say, but is cut off, almost frozen, staring at her phone. Not in a way a person freezes when terror sends their muscles trembling, but completely motionless. I instinctively slam it in reverse, backing into the position we came so that I could continue the course we were on. As we reached the end of our reverse turn, I slammed it into drive, but went nowhere as the rear of the early 2000 Lincoln was lifted off the ground. Before I can process what's happening, something charged from the woods to our right. At first, it was like a large red blob that moved with the speed and grace that seemed unnatural to its grotesque nature. As it closed the gap, it was clear that it was running on all fours, but only partly, so its forward movement agile, but uneven as it irregularly used its arms with this oddly bent hind legs. It was almost like its limbs were growing as it eventually came to stand on its hind legs and place its hands on the glass. Up close, I could see what I thought was fur, seemed more like strands of rotten flesh that grew as thick as Shaggy a dog and smelled overwhelmingly like rotten fish and moss. Its hands looked nearly human if it wasn't for the rotten fur and long claws. The face sticks with me as much as the smell, being somewhat shaped like a human that had its face twisted and pulled forward in a vague canine shape with large pointed ears toward the top of its head. Inside its snarling mouth were long, narrow teeth that looked almost too large to close. But its eyes were the worst part, bloodshot and yellow. They leered at my wife with a kind of hunger that promises unspeakable things. When you're in a flight or fight situation, you usually get that distinct moment of clarity where you make a choice, even if it's the one you're ashamed of. In that moment, I felt like a small dog defending my mate from a rabid wolf. I stomped on the gas pedal and bellowed hard, "Go now!" and a series of loud noises that sounded more like barks than human noises. It jolted suddenly and the rear of the car drops, leading to a loud peel-out. It kept pace with us, scratching at the car and banging on it the whole way till we broke 45 miles an hour, driving wildly through the winding country until we saw the lights of a town in the distance. We parked in a well-lit parking lot in the center of town next to a gas station. We busied ourselves as we inspected the car, reluctantly sharing what we thought we saw. She was in tears and sobbing about feeling pressure in her head and that felt like she was conscious but paralyzed. Looking under the trunk, I spotted a cracked strut and a lump of rotten flesh dangling from the frame member. The smell was still overpowering and sent us into a tear-felt hug as we stared at this piece of filthy creature and realized it was likely that it was two of them. The one in the window and the one that lifted the rear axle off the ground. Thoroughly shaken, we sat in the car facing opposite directions and discreetly unpacked our handguns and hid them under our blankets. We waited until 9 or so before setting back off towards our destination via the highway. I live in Illinois, and I've posted about other haunted locations before, such as Bachelor Grove Cemetery, and one of my friends and I were discussing an experience we had in the woods and were looking for some answers. The first event happened in late August of 2016 while we were running late one night. We both ran cross-country and track in high school and still do to this day. My friend worked a job that wouldn't get out sometimes until 10 or 11 at night, so we would typically go running very late at night. This had been happening for a couple of years at that point, so we knew our path very well. On the local running path, down 2.5 blocks into the woods that butts up against a large creek. At some points on the path in the woods, you can see houses and a park, but other times it starts to get a bit more secluded. We aren't talking like the wilderness here, though. There is wildlife in the area, mostly raccoons, skunks, too many close calls there, and random beaver and an occasional deer. Over the years, we have seen more and more coyotes around the streets, but never in the woods. Given our location, there isn't a local bear or wolf population. This is a critical detail to the story. We meet to go running one night around 11:15, 11:30. I am not entirely sure of the exact time, but it was fairly late, and thunderstorms were on their way according to the weather app. For this reason, both of us left our phones in the car. The one time we have, and we've regretted it ever since, and decided to run pretty fast to make it back before the storm. In the woods, it's mostly a wood chip trail until it gets 200 meters from our turnaround spot. a water pumping station, as our town has had flooding problems recently, where it then turns to asphalt. We run to the turnaround spot and start running back, as this was about a quarter of a mile from the wood chips to turnaround and back. I would estimate it takes about 2 to 3 minutes, given the slight stop at our turnaround spot. On our way back, we noticed what can only be described to this day as an upside-down trash can with a fuzzy, blurred outline in the middle of the path, right before it transitions into wood chips. If I had to guess, I would say about 3 to 4 feet tall, perhaps on the shorter side. Again, I need to stress that this was only 2 to 3 minutes after we had just passed this area and come back to the same exact spot. This thing had appeared in that short of time. We stopped running, as this was rather peculiar and not there when we ran by it first, but continued walking closer. We thought maybe someone moved something in front of us as a prank, as the only people that frequent the woods other than us are, at that time, teenagers smoking and drinking. But they're loud and can be heard from very far away. This thing was dead silent, and we had continued to get closer until we were about 50 feet away, and it started to move. When I say move, it was standing still, but as it was swaying part of its body completely left and then completely right. We had seen a red glare on either side when it turned its head, like a lit end of a cigarette when someone inhales. Not a very bright glow, but enough to be seen in the pitch black, as there are no lights in this area. Talking between us, we began to become very uneasy, as this was unlike any person-animal behavior we had ever seen. This thing made no sound, and we were worried it was some dangerous animal, so we started backing up slowly and made a run for it. It didn't follow us, but stayed in place, moving in the same manner. We ran as fast as we could back to my car and drove approximately 20 to 30 minutes later as the storm started to come in. No rain, just lightning. Looking around, we found no trace of whatever, no broken branches in the woods, no footprints, nothing that would lead you to believe that a large creature in the woods visited us. Neither of us could explain it, and after failing to find an observation, we tucked it away. Fast forward to the end of December of that year. We were on another run, one of our first at night since that incident, and when we got to the pumping station, we found a disturbing sight. We discovered what appeared to be a dead deer leg lodged in a chain-link fence, pretty much completely picked clean with the exception of some skin and hair and the hoof at the bottom. The whole thing was pretty intact from thigh to hoof. Shortly after, I decided to bring a different friend to these woods who has the ability to see spirits. I have mentioned him on this board here before. That is the whole other story. To see if he could discover anything. As we walked by the spot, we saw the trash can. He was startled and focused towards the woods. I asked him what he saw without me telling him any other information prior to our arrival, besides having some sort of experiences here, described a cloaked figure around the same height as what I saw, with beady red eyes staring at us. He said once it noticed that he could see it, it ran away quickly into the woods. In the weeks after, my running friend was back out on the trail only to discover multiple other bones that we believed to be missing parts to the dead deer. He discovered a spinal column with the rib ends just lying in the grass next to the pavement by the woods. He carefully moved it to be with the other deer leg to keep track of them all in one place. 3 days later, in the same exact spot, he discovered what appeared to be the neck vertebrae, and then a few days after that, in the same exact spot, he discovered another bone, one which we don't know what part of body it came from. Here are some photos of these bones. These links to the photos will be in the description below. At first, we were thinking wild animal when we experienced this creature, but These other occurrences lead us to believe something paranormal is happening in these woods. Does anyone have any explanation for what may be happening? I can't find an answer, and I'm desperate for any info whatsoever.
And there you have it, folks, this night-ending bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone's treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.